Star Wars did a Parent Trap episode, but are we with it? Welcome to Acolyte Aftermath. This is the Acolyte After Show of ComicBook Nation, the only show that does it all for geek culture and the official podcast of comicbook.com. I'm your host, Kofi Outlaw. With me is comic book assistant managing editor Joe Schmidt and one of our editors, Star Wars experts of many things, including the X-Men shirt he is wearing on his chest. Mr. Jamie Lovett's with us again. What's up, fellas?
Paid $20,000 for this Jim Lee art right here.
Oh, nice. And now I'm reading stories on Twitter about how if you had just done it for the right cause, he might have just drawn you a whole Wolverine Batman for free. Jim Lee's a great guy. So, we're back. And as we were talking about amongst ourselves, I feel like this was going to be a make or break episode of The Acolyte because we had gone through the thick of all the controversy, the backlash, the review bombing, all of that, the fair criticisms that were in there of the show, the pacing and the kind of choices we were getting with. And then we hit episode 5, which, definitely was a spike when you finally let Manny Jacinto loose. We got a kind of compelling villain. And the question was this going to be able to keep that momentum, or did we just get like one really great episode of The Acolyte that everybody could pretty much agree was pretty good? So we're jumping right in. Instant reactions. I guess I'll throw myself in. This is episode 6. It's called Teach/Corrupt. And as we go back, I like the duality of these episode titles, especially, or the 2-part day and night we got with that whole 2-part thing on Kofar. Yeah. But this was the, for lack of better words, this was the Star Wars Parent Trap episode, and we pulled a Parent Trap at the end of the last episode with May and Osha switching places, something that stretched credibility for some fans, but kind of, set up an interesting thing of would they be able to pull this off in this episode. I myself, just kind of processing what just is happening here and just kind of coming off the episode, I actually found it really compelling. I found it actually kind of well done. It's so stupidly simple, but as we talk about on our other segment, the pull list, which we'll be doing tomorrow for all you comic readers, it depends if you can fill in a kind of comic booky or stupidly simple premise with good character interactions and good character work. And I felt like we got that out of this episode. I think we got to see the seductive side of Manny Jacinto's, character Kimir, the stranger master, whatever we're calling him. Like, it didn't help the thirst trap memes for sure. Like, this was like every thirsty Kimir fans like
have we posted a meme yet of Manny next to this Adam Driver? Because I feel like that's an inevitable comparison.
Oh man,
our
in many ways
this
episode mirrors The Last Jedi, right?
If Christine from Socials, if Christine from Socials is watching this right now. If Christine from Socials is watching, please, can we get an Adam Driver, Kimir shirtless thirst trap double take so we can, get the Star Wars fans really riled up. But this was, if you were in that camp, this was a good episode for you for sure. But like I said, I liked seeing the on the nose sisters walking in each other's shoes, kind of seeing what life the other one's been leading. And I find it interesting to see them both kind of a little attracted to things and elements of what they have in those other lives. So I think even though it's kind of a classic trope, this is a show full of classic tropes, but it was well done. And this was the most I've been interested in May and Osha as characters. Let's just put it this way. So that achievement unlocked, and it proved that if you take away all the action and the flipping and the killing, like I like Kimir as a villain, and his take on the dark side is seductive. They are really going for like a sell here that this is just, hey, you've got blatant feelings. Yeah.
It was blatant from the moment he goes into the water that they are setting up Kimir. And again, like while you were initially talking about this, I got to give a shout out to our producer, Peter, because he was juxtaposing this with the footage of Kimir's naked ass going into that lake, which was the sexiest Star Wars has been since two siblings kissing, like the fact that Peter had that queued up for when you did that. This is a family show, Peter, but I appreciate what you were going for.
Yeah. Yeah. Producer Pete. You gotta love it. But yeah, so I also thought it was very well shot. I liked the kind of the setting with Kamir and Osha and that whole set piece with where he's been hanging out. They like I said, it's the most interested I've ever been in a dark side pitch, because this isn't like, yo, go down the street and kill that temple full of kids. Like it's kind of a pitch of perspective, and it's kind of an interesting take about leaning into the feelings part, and is that evil and all that stuff. So yeah, interesting things, kind of a weird episode at the same time. And yeah, we got to talk about who these Jedi all are and kind of the sinister shades we're getting in a couple of them. People are already in the internet putting together certain things, like, the particular shape of that scar on Kamir's back. And, just we get the other, very on the nose reveal of a weapon that could maybe, I'm just saying maybe possibly could leave that kind of scar we see for the first time in this episode. So yeah, some interesting things about kind of corrupting the sides of light and dark and muddling that whole thing all around. About, we come away liking Kamir a little more, being a little more side-eyed towards our Jedi, and kind of more interested in these two sisters. But that's my takeaway. That's my instant reaction. Jamie Lovett, I know you've been our man on the wall. You've been keeping it. You've never gone over to the dark side of any kind of fan haters or anything like that. But you are like keeping a fair critical bar here. So what did you think of this episode?
So it's obviously it's a split episode, and I liked one half better than the other. I thought the stuff with Kamir and Osha was vastly more compelling than the stuff with Soul and May, mostly because they were still playing the game that they didn't know each other on the ship with Soul. Kamir's asking all these interesting questions, laying out all these interesting rhetorical lures for Osha, and there's just kind of felt like nothing was really going on that ship. You say it was well shot. I think it was pretty well shot. I will say something about the show. I don't like, dumping on craftsmen, because often the results of their work or whatever budget and time would allow. But the indoor sets on this show, for some reason, are just not terribly. That cave they were in did not look like a cave to me, and it was very distracting to me. It looked very false to me. I don't know why that stood out to me, but it did. But otherwise, I thought the directing and everything was pretty good. I'm interested to see how far they take this like inverse thing. Like, it feels like now we're being set up for the light side twin to fall to the dark side, and maybe May gets a redemptive arc and comes back around after talking with Soul, which is interesting and it's a little bit too tidy, but too tidy in like a very Star Wars kind of way. Like, Star Wars is not messy. It is very, straightforward, light side, dark side, that kind of thing, balance. So that all worked for me. Mostly I came away from this episode thinking I really wish the show were like 4 1-hour episodes instead of 8 like 30-ish minute episodes. Because this episode did not feel like it covered enough ground for me. I'm okay with there not being action. I'm okay with it being focused on conversation and characterization, but it does not feel like we went from point A to like a meaningful point B. Especially with Soul and May, it felt like, let's set up whatever's going to happen the next episode instead of making meaningful ground, meaningful development in this episode, if that makes sense.
Okay. Woof. Like I said, Jamie Lovett has been our man on the wall, keeping that critical bar, not letting you guys get away with just anything on this. So that was his take. Joe, what was your take? Because, you can have a tendency to fall in the middle of us sometimes.
Well, I've been pretty high on this show since it began, and because I think the three of us, I know we're diehard Star Wars fans and have dived into the tertiary media wherever like it applies to us, You guys have gotten really deep into a lot of the High Republic stuff, and I haven't had the chance to. So this being my first really foray into all of this, I am really enjoying it. I think though some of it is really kind of falling right. This episode in particular, I feel like it is kind of falling into episodic type of storytelling that we get from Disney Plus Marvel shows, and not even that, but just 8-episode miniseries. Like this honestly feels like a certain episode of Game of Thrones where a character, or honestly, like Kofi, you watch True Detective. Does not like Venestra's role in this feel like a character who is the chief of police who may or may not have anything to do with it, that they introduce in episode 1 and don't mention again until episode 4, and all of a sudden they're super prominent, and it feels like their role is a lot more significant than you're initially meant to believe. And you were on this train before anyone else, because you're saying like Venestra is a very prominent character in the High Republic lore, and all of a sudden, like, here's this major storyline where now there are fan theories that she could be the bad guy. And this kind of gave me the vibe of the chief of police who knew a crime went down and is now having to come back and clean it up and cover it up. So like this episode felt more cliche to me than anything else, especially with like Venestra, as we're looking at in the footage next to us. Venestra's Padawan, who is asking a little bit, maybe like too many questions.
Yeah, I thought Homie was cooked. Yeah, I thought
Homie was cooked.
Yeah. I didn't know if he was making it off Kofar. I was like, you're staying around a lot of dead bodies. What's one
this
more?
Was this was the Law and Order episode, you know. This was the SVU episode of it, the whole thing. And I don't know if I like it yet, but I'm not done, because I've been a fan of the series so far. So I'm gonna wait and see what happens.
I feel like you're dancing around it a little bit, but I feel like what we all realize is that there's an alternate universe where this is like a Star Wars novel, right? Like this is the kind of thing that they would do in a Star Wars novel. It doesn't have the full-on spectacle of a Star Wars movie, which is fine. It's television, but there didn't used to be this weird middle ground between novel and movie that is streaming television. It used to just be, well, this is a weird side prequel that will pay somebody to write a novel about it. That was fine. And I don't think it has completely shed that like expanded universe media vibe, for better or worse.
But see, now everyone else gets to feel our pain, Jamie. Like everyone else who is consumed the legacy lore, the extended universe lore. Like now everyone else gets to realize like, oh, that book sucked, but that book ruled. And we're all in the same vibe now. Like that show sucked, that show ruled. Like everyone's going to have a different opinion about it. And at least we're just getting a different flavor of Star Wars. And that's what I like most about this.
Yeah, let me just reframe and just say, like, as a whole, I don't think this show, I think because we're over the halfway point and we got 2 episodes left, I think. Is that right? Yeah, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep. 2. So, yeah, I don't think that this show is a failure at all. I think you may have varying degrees of liking it, but it's a swing in Star Wars that's very much in line with Star Wars and hits a lot of the same beats. And I think, if anything, we're saying at a lot of times that it's either hitting beats, which is funny because we could do this weird schizophrenic thing with Star Wars where we're saying it's hitting too many beats that are familiar, but then we have like episode 3 making people scream that it's embracing all this radical new stuff and getting crazy. So, you know, it's fun all around. So we're doing a lot and it's a swing, and it's not, not one of these episodes has left me bored. The most I've said is that 4 didn't feel like it had enough development or like anything besides wandering in the woods, having conversations leading up to an awesome thing. So that's the most I've said. So that's the caveat I just want to lay down in this. But yeah, let's get to the real stuff. Like, let's get to the real things, because people are already exploding. These theories are exploding. Yeah, I was on Venestra Row because I read, Jamie and I both did, like, especially that first phase of High Republic books, like right out during 2021. Because we were all starved from the pandemic. We had nothing to do but sit home and read. So we read a lot of this stuff, and we got to it early. And yeah, she was like the pluckiest of pluck characters. She's like the youngest Jedi Knight ever. You know, she's like very heroic. There's this whole thing where she bonds with this other child prodigy and fighting the Nihil. But as it goes on, like it gets dark for her. She loses people. Excuse me. She loses her former master to these pirates and these force-eating monsters. She thinks she loses her Padawan and her best friend, the other prodigy. Like, she leaves the Jedi Order and becomes a way seeker, which is basically what they retconned the Ahsoka Tano's into being, like way back when. Jedi who just kind of serve the Force, but they're like, nah, Jedi Order's too crazy. I'm not doing that. So she went her own way already. So this episode and her characterization and how they're playing her is in and of itself kind of very telling if you read that other lore. And it was what I said I wanted to see in this show, because it makes me hope that thematically they can get to this place of wrapping this around, like you said. And I think you were thinking of, and I'm going to help you out, but you're thinking of Rollo Tomasi, which is LA Confidential, which is what's his name, the captain of the police, that excellent character actor. But yeah, when the chief of police turns out to be in on it, and you know that he's at the shack with the shotguns. But yeah,
I wasn't even thinking. I was thinking like seasons of Reacher. I was thinking of Sopranos.
James,
you know,
yeah,
and
James Cromwell. James Cromwell,
oh,
excellent
James
actor.
There's so many. That is just such a good trope that I get why they would do it, but also at this point, I'm like, I feel like I've seen this before.
Can I say about Vernestra what I think is interesting? In a way, she is like a microcosm of the whole problem with the Jedi, right? She starts off as this plucky hero, and then, you know, by now, a couple hundred years later, after the High Republic novels, we find her, and whether she's full villain or not, she's definitely changed. Now she is this political animal, political creature that is more concerned with placating senators than going off and following the Force in the wild. She is an avatar for the entire downward spiral that the Jedi Order has been in since the High Republic. And then also, funny thing about Star Wars is some of them live a long time, right? So we get Kamir saying he was a Jedi a long time ago, and I have no idea what that means. Like, was he a Jedi like 10 years ago when he was, you know, a teenager or younger man or something? Or has he used Dark Force magic to stay alive for 100 years, and only Vernestra Rwoh is going to recognize this guy because she's also hundreds of years old. You can't tell. That's immediately where my mind went when he said a long time ago. I was like, how long exactly? A decade? A century? Like, what are we talking here? Are you a clone? I don't know. Anything's possible.
Yeah, it's Star Wars. Yeah, I'm kind of, you know, my theory was she was a Sith Lord. I mean, I could be stretching that. I think that she and Soul could turn out to be the corrupt cops that did a cover up, and you know they went down that path because they both were kind of dirty. That she saw like a Padawan turning, and because of it would make sense for her character. She saw stuff happen. She saw, like, you know, villains in what the dark side is, and how freaky that all can be, and what it can do to the galaxy. If she flipped out and, you know, not to anger the last Jedi hive, but if she went like, you know, full Luke and turned on like Ben Solo that way, then, you know, then covered that up because she felt bad about that, or had lost her way or whatever, and then was like, well, I got it back and I'm good now. And like you said, became this political animal after that because she couldn't trust herself with the Force. There have been hints all along that Soul is playing like stoic Jedi Master, but is very emotional, emotionally unsettled, and, you know, has been so for hiding and kind of basically, you know, not in a closet, but like wearing a mask for, so to speak, for those 16 years of pretending like, oh, everything's fine, everything's dandy, but he's the one cop who's like still throwing up in the toilet at night because he remembers the horrible thing, or he's drinking himself in the bar and or that was actually Indara drinking herself in the bar, probably getting punched in the face because that's how she dealt with it. And, you know, yeah. So it's interesting, and I think it'll be something more nuanced than that, than just like secret Sith Lord, but it'll be, the Jedi and the things they did and the way they compromised on their own values and things like that. that's what created, that would be ironic that it resparked the Sith after they've been gone for, all this time. And even if Kamir is the first guy back, and starts setting up in spreads, and people have said, oh, he's going to be like Plagueis, or he's going to be this to the Knights of Ren theory. If he just inspires all of that, if he just puts that idea back out, because that's all he's trying to do, really. He's just trying to give birth to this idea and spread it. And, I'm a big person who believes the idea, the viral nature of ideas. Like once you get it out there, like, I always say, like one caveman one day got the idea and knocked those rocks together and got fire. But when he did it, everybody got fire after that. Like, that's just the way of ideas. So I think that's his goal in all this, and kind of tying that into the hubris of the Jedi and them doing dark things and covering it up to kind of keep this ideal of the High Republic and we're great and we're infallible and all that. That'd be kind of more interesting almost. And I can see shades of that coming up in this episode, because at first I was thinking, yeah, she's gonna kill that nosy little Padawan guy, but then I was thinking, like, yeah, maybe she's looking at this crime scene like, what the hell do I do with all this? Like, how do I cover this up? Because she's like, well, what do you see? Like, does this guy get it? Like, can we say? And so, yeah, I think there could even be some people in the chat. Shout out to the chat. I know we're kind of talking and going down this whole thing and trying to keep up with what you guys are saying, but I do think there's a whole pattern that we can see towards the end of the series now. Producer Peter kind of laid it out. Obviously, we're going to get a Rashomon flashback into episode 3 and episode 8. That'll be Saul's version of the story and like what he saw. Because I think Osha and May were our characters for that episode the first time, arguably. But we'll see it kind of from Saul's perspective and the Jedi's perspective this time, probably even before they came to the planet. And then in episode 9, we'll figure out who's really who and like what is really what and who survives, or if everybody gets killed and this all gets covered up. And we kind of fill in the history of why this happened now, but nobody really figured it out until it was too late, like hundreds of years later. So that's what I'm going with. What do you guys think?
I mean,
Joe?
I think everyone in the chat is kind of basically laying out two paths for what they think, is it going to tie into the Knights of Ren, or is it going to tie into Darth Plagueis? And all of it, I think, is kind of on the table at this point. Knowing the way that Disney Star Wars has been, I would not be surprised if they go Ren aspect, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they reconcile all of this together as far as like a specific origin between a dark side or a dark council. The fact that it is Kamir who is going to be the one to set the stage for all of it, I think Plagueis is kind of inevitable. Otherwise, what are we doing with this timeline, especially if it's 100 years beforehand, given the ages of all these people? I think that the lore aspect, though, is not why I am enjoying this story. I'm really liking all of it because I think it really gets down to the aspect of duality in Star Wars. And Kofi, you remember you and I, when we first did the first episode of the show, that was the thing that I was most interested in all this, was getting into the duality of what it means to be light side or dark side, Jedi or Sith, balance to the Force, and how balance is being restored because there has not been a dark side presence for so many centuries. And finally, that is coming to the forefront. And not just that, but Kamir even says it himself. He's interested in the power of two. Like, we are seeing that dynamic of the power of two and how the Sith are able to take control because there's a master and there's an apprentice. And that they lay low and they bide their time and they come up and they usurp power where they can. Like, we're finally seeing like what that looks like. And as soon as we learn that these two girls were both born from a Force sensitive coven of Force witches, that they didn't even explicitly name him as Dathomir witches, but they obviously are very similar to that. And we're getting them creating life. That shit itself just immediately sold me as a Star Wars fan. In this concept of what the Sith looks like and like is restoring balance. And if you're going to do a story that like again, we've always had these theories about gray Jedi or people who walk the line down the middle and different people who utilize the Force. I feel like in canon, like even more so than Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order, this is a really good exploration of what the Force looks like when it's not controlled by a certain group of people with an agenda. And that's what I really enjoyed. I really think I'm all in. This episode was slow, but I still enjoyed it.
Shout out to the fans on Facebook. We're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. Facebook crowd seems to think we are really paid by Disney. My God, you see us sitting in these rooms, right? Do we look like we're paid by Disney? Disney, if you would like to pay us, I can tell you that we're always open to negotiation. So if you'd like to pay us,
it's really funny. Great. Like it's really funny how liking things all of a sudden it's like you like something. Oh man,
I just want to know
show that much.
I feel like I'm screwing up if there's like a whole world people know of where you just get paid for liking stuff, even like just mindlessly. I can do that.
Oh yeah.
I am not helping my own income, but no,
I'm all aboard.
Yeah. We have to watch a lot too, guys. You got to understand, we have to watch a lot. So our range of like what's terrible goes very far in a lot of genres. Okay.
Yeah.
So
if we want to talk about how disappointed I am in the new season of The Bear, we can't. But I don't think that's what people are listening to us on the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
get derailed.
We
were on a perfect segue, so let's not get derailed. You talking about the duality of the show and everything is a perfect segue for us to kind of throw back to when we had comicbook.com's, I believe, Brandon Davis, I believe so, go and sit down with Master Saul himself, Lee Jung-jae, and who talked about Saul and kind of the relationship with these twins and the themes around that. So let's check that out because I think it's a perfect tie-in for what this episode was and where we're going next.
Skill. Jedi characters, I feel like a lot of them are defined by their movement, their skill in battle, and their sort of their way of being above everyone else. They're so confident they're going to win every fight, and the physicality is sort of a lot of the times the first thing we think about with a Jedi character. But your character has a lot of emotional investment and relationships, like with the main character May and other characters. So how did you kind of balance that and find the way into those relationships and use those as the driving force for the emotion throughout The Acolyte with Master Saul?
그 제다이라는 캐릭터들은 아주 무술에 능하고 자신감 있는 캐릭터인데 그런 만큼 이제 그 마스터 솔은 그런 부분도 있지만 아주 감정적인 캐릭터이기도 하는데 그 무술에 능한 그런 부분과 그 감성적인 부분을 어떻게 밸런스 하셨나요?
저는 아까도 말씀드렸지만은 이 하이 리퍼블릭 그 시대이다 보니까 저는 좀 아까도 말씀드렸다시피 뭔가 이렇게 좀 거친 느낌이 좀 좋다라고 말씀을 드렸는데 그게 감정적으로 거친 느낌인 것 같아요. 그래서 아무리 무술을 잘하고 그 다음에 포스가 강한 그런 제다이 소울이다 하더라도 기본적으로 느끼는 그 공포와 두려움은 있을 거라고 생각했어요. 그래서 그 처음 악당을 만났을 때의 그 두려움, 그 다음에 한번 이렇게 뭐라고 해야 될까, 그 싸움이 한번 딱 시작하고 나서 상대방을 딱 느꼈을 때 그 공포, 이런 것들을 좀 표현해 주는 것이 조금 더 소울한테는 좀 소울이 표현하는 제다이와 다른 스타워즈 에피소드에 나왔었던 제다이들과 조금 다르게 보여줄 수 있는 부분이 바로 그런 게 아닌가라는 생각을 하면서 오샤를 만났을 때의 감정 표현하는 것도 조금 더 인간적으로 표현을 하게 되고, 그 다음에 악당을 만났을 때에도 그런 공포감을 좀 더 표현하는 것이 저한테는 조금 더 다른 제다이로 보여질 수 있는 그런 포인트가 아닌가라고 생각했습니다.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned this like roughness I wanted to embody because of the High Republic timeline, but I think this kind of concerns like the emotions as well, kind of expressing them a little bit roughly. So even though like externally Master Soul is extremely powerful in the Force, I think the Jedi still have like this intrinsic fear, right? Whether it's like the first time meeting a villain or right before or like in the very beginning of a battle, feeling the power of your opponent for the first time. So I think compared to the other Jedi, I really wanted to express Soul in a unique way because he is extremely humanistic, and you see that with his relationship to Osha, but having that like small element of fear or small element.
All right. Well, first of all, shout out to the translator for nailing that.
I was just going to say, man, like the fact that we've been in these junket interviews before and we know how hard it is to do these types of things. And the fact that he gave such a thoughtful answer and then the translator just nailed that answer afterwards.
Yeah, that was impressive.
Shout out to both. Amazing.
Yeah, that was great. That was almost like from a Key and Peele special. She just stepped in. She was like, "All right, here we go. Boom. Here's what we're saying." And yeah, but she, it's interesting to say because, yeah, obviously you might hear that, and if you're just kind of a casual fan watching this, you guys are probably just like, "Yeah, what does that mean?" But we do, as Joe said, a lot of these junkets, and there's only so much an actor can say for fear of spoilage, but you got to pay attention to these little details, like saying that he went into this character. Reading this character as somebody who's on the outside, very stoic, but obviously has this emotional cracks for things like fear and insecurity and things like that is very kind of important and fits into what we think we saw kind of building up in kind of to culminating a little bit in this episode with the fact that it's beginning to feel like everybody kind of assumed in episode 3, many of us at least, that Saul was the one who was like sensible. He was there, but like the other ones might have gone nuts, but he was there and tried to like save something. Now it's beginning to feel a little bit more and more like Soul's maybe one of the main ones who has something to really keep silent about. And especially the heavy guilt of him coming to Osha and quote unquote saving her, maybe not being the pure act that it seemed like when we first saw this episode. And all I want to know is, do we have our May is right when May was right shirts printed up in that wonderful Magneto style? Because, could May turn out to be right?
I want to bring
My
up...
wife would love nothing more. She's the one who has been diehard May fan, and I'm like, how dare you?
The Jedi are really going through their like late 80s comics did to superhero deconstruction period where they're like, are they the good guys? I don't know. But I'm reminded, all that talk about Soul reminded me of the scene in the first episode where he's asking the students about like how they visualize the Force. If I remember, one of them says fire. And he's like, oh, you got to like control that or whatever. And I think at the time you're meant to think that he is being reminded of Osha. But now, after hearing that quote, after seeing how far we've come, they were clearly worried he was going to fall to the dark side by striking down his enemy last episode. Is that in him, that fire, that visualization of the Force? Is that what he's been repressing this whole time? And was that there? The big question is, was that there before he went to that planet with the Witch Coven, or is it built on whatever went down when they went to get the twins, which is interesting. And
which we still don't know about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're really dragging that out.
And
yeah.
I mean, I don't think that we're going to get away from that moment without learning that there is blood on everyone's hands. And I don't mind Star Wars doing things like this in, when it's a show that they can take a little bit more time and examine what it means. I think Star Wars has fundamentally always been, the three of us have talked about this at length. Star Wars to me is different from what it means to a lot of different people. Like, we all go through this. but I think that ultimately it's a struggle between good and evil, and I don't mind seeing a long form examination of what good and evil is in the context of like what the eye of the beholder, because doing it in an 8-episode series is obviously different than doing that in a movie or a trilogy. Like you have to capture these things in different ways, and so I think that this is the perfect way to do it. To show why the arrogance and the blindness of the Jedi is what leads to the rise of the dark side, but also maybe why the dark side is necessary to some degree. It's just
I think I'm going to be trying to be very careful in cribbing what I'm saying next in just what I'm saying next. Culture wars aside, everything else around the show aside, like I think that Star Wars is going through the maturation of lore in which George Lucas created a very kind of binary system to what this whole thing was, right? It was like, that's why we got in our many arguments about the great Jedi in our offices. Jamie Lovett pointed out, like the Force in the Jedi is like balance. It's order, ordering and balance and attunement to the Force. The dark side is disruption of that attunement and kind of the chaotic version of that. And so there isn't like a way to put those two things in balance. But I think the lore is struggling to widen out that kind of understanding of good and evil, like you said. And that's not just here, it's everywhere in superheroes. Like Superman guy benched because he's too good. Everybody started saying Batman's a rich guy and a cop. Like, what are we like? Who's not helping Gotham in the myriad of ways he could be doing it besides beating people up and stuff. So like all of superhero lore and kind of like what we're doing with these notions of good and evil have been going through the ringer in a very and admittedly very confusing world where like what you get rewarded and what you get punished for is very strange these days. Like, our current biggest celebrity is from right here, homegrown Nashville, right? Like it's the Hawk Tuah girl. Shout out to her. Like what you get punished
God damn
for,
it.
what you get hey, what you get rewarded for and what you get punished for are now so confusing to just about anybody, right? Like, so I think Star Wars is going through this kind of same thing with dealing with like, okay, so what does the dark side mean like now? And like, what's the dark side when you can get famous on the internet? You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean anymore? Like, so we're going through this weird process of trying to examine these things and are they all as clean cut as we think? And of course, no, they don't. And this has been kind of an interesting way to do it in this episode. That's all I'm going to say. I don't think this was the strongest. I would still say that I would put this above 4, though. Like as a bottle kind of episode, and these are very episodic, I would say this was better than 4. Obviously not as great as 5 because 5 had awesome fights. But I'm not mad at for trying to kind of offer new ideas, especially connecting those ideas to how institutions crumble, because that's really what's at the heart of this. Is in the midst of all this, it's how do these kind of institutions who are supposed to be built in steadfast and indelible begin to crack and crumble. And this is trying to do the ambitious job of teaching you how that happens. But the mystery aspect could be the biggest thing holding it back, because it's now got to deliver on that mystery and make a thematic point. And that's a lot for 2 more episodes to do, but we'll see.
I feel like that's my...
Sorry, go ahead.
Like that's my blind spot, because I feel like I feel like a Star Wars apologist, because sometimes I'm like, that's not Star Wars. Star Wars has always been a fairy tale with good guys and bad guys, and sometimes I can find myself making arguments for the things that I like, because I like Star Wars. I'm sorry, people in the comments who might dislike this show or and be mad at that, but I just like Star Wars, and no, Disney did not pay us to do this positive episode. In fact, it was the Hawk Tuah girl, her representation, are paying us. So Kofi, your check is in the mail. Good job. Thank you for mentioning the Hawk Tuah girl in that. So like we're good. That's the only thing we're paid to shill. in this
I'm
show.
confused.
Yeah.
Was Hawk-Tua the Plo Koon looking Jedi that got killed on the planet? I'm a little lost.
What a wonderful way to tie that all back. Well done.
They rewrote her birthday, and that's like, so that's the funny shit.
Yeah, they changed the book. They changed the wiki on that, and then it all went to hell.
So that's so like when we get to these things where we talk about, if you're mad about rewriting Chaotic Mundi's whole thing when George Lucas was retroactively putting new scenes to change stuff in the movies, like, why is this the hill that we are going to die on? Why is it the fact that like so-and-so was born at a certain time and mentioned something like, oh, the Sith have not been around for 1,000 years, when the show is actively showing you how the Jedi were blind to the Sith? It's like, this is what we're seeing. Like, this is what retconning is. We're all comic book fans. We're all sci-fi fans. This is actively happening right now in House of the Dragon on HBO. You know? Like, if like these are things, like if it adds to it and it changes something to a way that contributes to what you already know, but like alters things, that's completely different. That's not ruining what you've already come to enjoy. It's basically adding on to it, and you don't have to like it. No one's telling you have to like it.
People,
but to hate because of that, it's just ridiculous.
People think that a widening of perspective is something that must be enjoyed, and it very much doesn't, and it very often isn't. You're comfortable in the perspective you have, but then once you widen out, you then have work to do, because then you got to understand some new stuff, consider some new stuff, decide if you like it or not. It's work, but it's not something that needs to be enjoyable. But if you're a fan, then check it out. Like, get in there and see if you like the franchise. And shout out to everybody who watches the show and then comes on these shows and talks to us about it, because I don't want to be a couch, armchair psychologist, but you might be. You say you hate it, but you might be. You say you hate them, but you might be a little into them. That's all I'm saying.
Let's just say that they're paying us more money than the Disney people are to talk about the show. Let's be real about that. So thank you for
your one comment is more than we get from Disney. So yes, thank you to contributions to our coifers, and no, we have no NDAs.
Before we wrap up, can I add one weird conspiracy theory about all this? And this is completely ridiculous and has no storyline context to anything. That planet, what if it was Octo? Right?
I thought that. Hey, wait a minute! I thought that.
And then we see like the weird little like penguin creatures, like the armadillo penguin creatures. Hear me out. What if porgs are an invasive species not native to Octo, and then we see them at the end of this series where someone transfers from one planet to another with one like native porg, and that porg just like full on takes over the agriculture and the ecosystem of Octo and like kills off that other species? Because do you remember that Simpsons episode where they fly back with the frog and then they fly back with the koala? That's what if porgs are just an invasive species, and this is just an elaborate gag to show how porgs are actually the biggest threat to the Star Wars galaxy since the Sith.
So a couple things about that.
It's gonna be a wild Star Wars Vision segment.
They definitely, like, that planet is definitely giving off like Octo vibes. But I mentioned this to you too. The problem with trying to determine whether it's that just based on vibes is that is what every outdoor shot in a Star Wars show looks like now. Like, everything is just color graded the way they color graded the shots on Octo. That's just what outside looks like if you're not in a desert in the Star Wars universe. So I do think there's a good, like, I will laugh so hard if this whole series just ends up being an origin story of the map to Octo in The Force Awakens. Like, the same way that the Obi-Wan Kenobi show was basically like a justification for why Obi-Wan calls Anakin Darth in the original trilogy instead of Vader or Anakin. Like, if this just ends up being, here's how the map to Octo got made, I will laugh incredibly hard. But yeah, I think it's possible, but I wouldn't jump to that conclusion necessarily just because of the history.
Damon Gray, one of our super fans, shout out to Damon, pointed out, and I think he is very much correct, that this was possibly Baldemnik, which was an ocean planet adorned with rocky tropical islands, and it was known to have it became kind of notable when Cartosis deposits. Yes, it was heavy in Cartosis deposits, which would eventually fall into the hands of Sith Lords Darth Tenebris and Darth Plagueis. So, could this guy be, could be...
Yeah, that certainly seems to tie a few things together.
Yeah.
Shout out Damon Gray, man. The dude is...
What are we even doing here? Like,
it's where Plagueis killed.
Yeah.
It's where Plagueis killed his master Tenebris and took over the mining rights for the Cortosis.
I would laugh really hard if somehow Kamir ends up being like young, hot Darth Sidious for some reason. he's Palpatine. Palpatine's just way older than any of us thought.
The blatant hotness of Kamir in the show is just it is not fair. I'm watching this with my wife, and she's just like, I like the dark side. I'm like, what is going on?
It'd be interesting if we found out that he is he is Plagueis, and that everything that we knew about Plagueis, him being a Mun, of the Mun race and everything, was just lies, just straight up lies that people told. Who would ever tell the truth about that? Right? If you're a Sith Lord and your whole thing, and unless you are the Sith Lord that popped out and showed Jedi, nobody knows who you are. So there's entire lineage of Sith that nobody ever knew who they were, really, except the people who had to die by their hand, right? So it would be really interesting if this is a flip, and he is Plagueis, and or whatever, or one of the other ones, or gets killed or something. I don't know, but we're definitely on a planet that seems to tie a few things together there. So Baldemnik seems to be where this could be definitely set. So you guys are throwing Star Wars planets at me, and it's crazy. I got a lot of Wikipedia stuff to do. Shout out to Wikipedia. Thank you for always being on hand and helping us do these things. All right. Those are instant reactions.
Except when they change their birthdays. We don't like it when they change birthdays.
Oh my God. Those guys,
Star
they just
Wars
press
fans.
the buttons. Things happen in Star Wars, and they have to press the buttons. They can't put a notice up in a long thing saying, this changed, but we didn't want to press the button. Sorry. We believe in the true. We only believe in the one true canon. Hail, Hail Beelzebub or whatever.
Thank you for doing the good work at Wikipedia, for sure. Those people do a lot of thankless work that we're all benefiting from. So getting mad about that shit. Again, Star Wars fans, it's crazy. Come on.
All right, this is it. Next week, I will be on break, but these fine gentlemen will be here to step into the breach for the flashback part 2 episode. And I feel like every week, though, I said make or break this week, but I feel like every week we are riding the razor's wire of, could this be the make or break for this show, where we either go, oh my God, they pulled it all together, or we're like, oh my God, I don't believe it landed here, but we'll see. Shout out to you guys, and shout out for all the people who said Leslie Headland didn't have enough, hard edge to this. We had cameos by Jecki and Yord's bodies, which was haunting. Jecki's was haunting because they did a jump cut to that, and I was not ready for that. And I was like, why is she staring at me? Poor Jecki. That was pretty hard. And that's kind of a weird, creepy ending. This was a weird way to cut the ending of this one with Osha in the helmet. And I didn't know what was about to happen there. It was kind of good. I didn't know if we were going to get a Luke in the cave moment type deal out of this before we popped out or something. But it was an interesting thing. So I hope we actually go somewhere with that, in the next episode somehow. All right. That's all I got.
Safe to say.
Anybody got any? What was that?
I think it's safe to say that we're definitely going to get more of all that, the darkness. In the first episode of the show, you and I were talking about Leslie Headland and how we feel you and I as Star Wars fans feel like she gets Star Wars and she's doing a good Star Wars show. And there's always this internal journey of the start, where they basically kind of have to go out on their own and do something on their own. Anakin had to go murder a bunch of sand people. Luke had to go into a cave in a swamp and like fight his dad, and then actually find out that he was killing himself at the same time. Like, we are seeing a really cool take on that, and I really appreciate this refreshing take on the Force in a way that incorporates all the fan theories and headcanon that came up out of the prequels, because the prequels really kind of kicked down the door over what, you know, all this, the Force nonsense is with duality, rule of two, and did Plagueis and Palpatine create life? We're finally like getting that in full force. And the fact that she gets that, I'm all for just going down this rabbit hole in the show and figuring out what that means.
Yeah, people are now. We got the High Republic coming in saying this could be Venestra's Rose, Emiri Kantaros, the one she tried to save from the Nihil, who was kidnapped by the Nihil. Yeah, he had like dark side leanings before, and yeah, it was crazy. This is getting crazy, but I don't think he was ever just. I mean, he could be, but he definitely wasn't described as hot Asiatic looking man. I don't think so. We'll see where this all goes. But this has been Acolyte Aftermath. We are Comic Book Nation. We are the only show that does it all for geek culture. And if you subscribe, we have all kinds of awesome geek culture content. This week alone, we have done after shows for House of the Dragon. For the Acolyte, we have Anime Initiative, our anime-focused show, talking about the best summer anime of this year. Tomorrow we have the pull list where we're going to pull all the best comics of the week and break those down. Thursday is Quick Save, our gaming-focused segment. And Friday is a live show where we talk about the entire week of cult and geek culture with all of our fans, which is a fun one. Be sure to be on for those on Fridays. Thank you guys for hopping on tonight and going over the Acolyte with me again. Thank you for everybody who's pushing the buttons for producer Peter, Rich, and everybody else who helps make these shows happen. We appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in and commenting and watching with us. And whether you loved or hated it, we just are happy to have all you guys in a Star Wars little pile with us here and just talking about what we all just saw. So be sure to come back next week because we love having you, no matter what your opinion is. All right. Take it easy, guys. We're out of here. Peace. May the Force be with you.